All right. Well, thank you, folks, for listening in. We've got Verity today, and we are going to be talking about M&A, which is a huge topic, especially in wealth management. If you look back over the last 5 years, especially. So we're going to be talking a little bit more about preparing for, M&A, what to do before, after the whole process, tech stacks, all that fun stuff. So before we get into the details, Verity, I'm going to hand it over to you. Tell us a little bit about your firm, or your company, I should say, how you got into this work, and what have you.
Great. Well, first of all, thanks for having me. Really appreciate the opportunity here to join you. So I started many years ago. I got my degree in information systems, computer information systems, and ended up landing a job at an RIA. So it was my job to be that first line of defense for users. So I was, working with the technology that was being used, but also, helping with kind of operational improvements, just process improvements, helping
Mm,
identify ways
yep.
to just do things better across the firm. And I worked at that firm for about 8 years, and then ended up going and working for a software vendor, which was literally the technology, a lot of the portfolio accounting and solutions like that we had been using at that firm. But I was doing implementations of their software, so it was portfolio accounting, reporting, billing, trading,
The whole
rebalancing,
thing.
CRM,
Yeah.
doing all of that kind of software usage. And of course, I love being exposed to so many different users and seeing how different operations and technology were being used from one RA to the next.
Hmm.
And really, it was that experience that was the foundation that, you know, that established me to go, I really would like to do this independently. I want to go out and do this on my own. And so starting in 2015 is when I founded Bearsoft. And so now we're coming up on year 10, which is
Oh,
very
congrats.
exciting.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you. And yeah, so we are a vendor agnostic consulting company, and
Hmm.
we're a team of 9 people, all
Hmm.
working remotely across the U.S. And we have clients in both Canada and the U.S.
Hmm.
And yeah, we simply are focusing on operational improvements through the use of technology. So our services include just overall general advisory services with technology.
Hmm.
Because it's a lot about the software you're using, right, and the processes that you're doing day
Yep.
in, day out to service your clients, both back office and front office. But then also we do lots of process reviews to recommend improvements to current operations and technology,
Yeah.
help with the selection of new vendors and
Hmm.
new technology, making sure that the right fit for your business needs,
Yep.
because no firm is alike. Everybody does have their niche and their specialties, and even people make an impact into the type of technology you should be using.
Yeah.
Uh, and certainly we then get into the details of implementation, and we do lots of historical transaction conversions, performance conversions, um, implementing data warehouses. We also offer project management services, and we also have an in-house US based development team that builds
Wow.
custom applications and integration and
Wow.
automation.
Wow. That's a huge component. Do you work
Long list.
integrations for certain CRMs or?
Any and all. Like
Oh,
we're
wow.
we'll work with all of them. Yep.
Okay.
And the thing is, I've always said, well, when it gets into the different technologies, it's really more about the expertise in the industry and
Yep.
knowing the industry of investments and the client base.
Right.
Uh, that's where it's really, really important. One CRM to another, they have different features and functionalities, but in general, really behind the scenes, the back end, the data structure,
Yep.
it's all the same. It really is,
Yeah.
So when it comes into building integrations using APIs, I mean, it's just a programming language.
Hmm.
So connecting one application to another, it's we're agnostic. It really doesn't matter if you're using Redtail or Wealthbox or Salesforce or Dynamics. Like
Yeah, yeah.
the of it, we've worked with them all.
Okay. So I want to get into sounds like you all cover a lot, which is great. Sounds like you've got the deep kind of hands-on work that you do in this industry as well. I know we talked about M&A as one of those components. So it is, M&A can be so daunting. I got back from a dimensional conference this past fall, and one of the things that came up was that a lot of firms will come into these conferences really jazzed. They're thinking they're going to go into a succession, do some sort of M&A, what have you. They're not sure. And they learn about it and they're like, oh gosh, goodness, I'm glad that I learned a lot about that because now I know about it. I'm not sure that's the route I want to go, or at least I feel better prepared. So can we kind of talk about, where do you all come in at the M&A process? And I love to kind of actually just start from like a more logical timeline of like, where do you even start? Like if we were going to kind of start with an M&A and you're thinking about an M&A, like where do you all come in that process? And then maybe kind of talk that through during the M&A actual transaction and then kind of post. So maybe we'll start from the beginning. Where should a firm be? What should they be thinking about, and where do you guys come in from the beginning?
Sure. Well, it depends on if you're a buyer or a seller, right? So it even starts there. And we work on both sides. So on the seller side, I think what's really critical is for firms to think about, what their existing processes and workflows are,
Hmm.
how, like, what technology are they using, or are they doing everything in spreadsheets?
Yep.
How clean is their data?
Hmm.
Um, just what are the processes around it? It's really interesting. I too have actually attended a number of like M&A focused summits over the
Yeah.
last year, and
Yes.
what's really come to light is how important using modernized technology is to the valuation of your business. It can
Mm,
actually increase your valuation. So something that I think a lot of people don't really realize is that by having efficient processes and more modern technology can actually give you a better buying price.
a
Uh,
boost. Yes.
yeah,
Yes.
and certainly if you're not at that stage, getting to that stage can take time.
Yeah.
So, if anything, it's also never too late to
Hmm.
get started on this.
Hmm.
So, for the way that we approach working with a seller is, of course, getting in there. We like to start by doing reviews of their processes and understanding, you know, how they currently do things, what are their operations, what are their workflows, what
Hmm.
technology are they using, are they doing lots of double data entry, things like
Yep.
that,
Yep.
and really try to get them as streamlined as possible.
Hmm.
Um, so that they're in a good place as they either continue to grow or they just remain as they are, either for just future planning, whether it's succession, it's, passing it on to G2 or G3,
Hmm.
whatever it may be, or it is truly selling to another firm.
Hmm.
Um, and certainly selling to another firm, if you are efficient in your processes and using better technology, it also will make the transition a lot easier, both for users as well as the end clients. Just
Hmm.
that overall experience will be a lot better.
Hmm.
Um,
So if you're
Otherwise,
thinking to sell, one of the things to be thinking about is like get your operational house in order,
yeah,
from a technology standpoint, and then I'll just say also from like a data cleanse standpoint. Is that kind of what I'm hearing? So,
exactly. Yeah,
okay.
got it.
And then you were going to say
Yeah.
from a seller standpoint?
Yeah, from a seller standpoint, I'd say our involvement tends to be later in the picture, and usually
Yeah.
we're probably not getting involved in any sort of M&A efforts
Hmm.
until usually like the LOI
Hmm.
timeline. Um, but I'd say, there's just things that a buyer should be thinking about looking at if they are kind of in this M&A world. And certainly everybody always talks about culture. You got to have a good fit.
Yes.
Um, and certainly that's important for client retention.
Hmm.
But I'd say really even before a deal closes, buyers should be reviewing the seller's accounts, their asset types, what needs to get converted, the type of custodians they use, the type
Yes.
of client reports, just getting a better understanding of current state
Hmm.
can impact certainly the acquisition and deal costs, but
Hmm.
also the transition timeline.
Oh,
Um,
yes. Just like getting in there, like kind of getting into the day to day, if you will, a little bit more
right.
than just sort of like the balance sheet of kind of where everything's at. So,
Exactly. Yes. And certainly in the M&A deal, everybody's always just thinking about the numbers, like, oh, I'm
mhm.
going to buy a firm for X and then that AUM, comes under my
Right.
business. Like there's so much more to it that you really need to think about.
Yep.
Uh,
So
yeah.
fair.
Mhm.
So t thinking about that kind of uh so there's a buyer, there's a seller, right? People are looking to engage one way or another. What are red flags before you even like, are ready to sign on the dotted line that you think
Yeah.
either the buyer or the seller should be looking out for?
Yeah. I would say, um, I'd say certainly when it comes to technology, right? Are they
Yep.
using modern technology or not? You know,
Mm-hmm.
how difficult is their current operations, functioning at?
Mm-hmm.
Um, I really like to go back to that idea of people, processes, and technology,
Mm-hmm.
right? That's a very common term in this industry, and
Yeah.
you really need to make sure that that's balanced and
Mm-hmm.
effective, across the firm, because again, it really helps with bringing, kind of that cohesiveness of bringing the firms together.
Mm-hmm.
And certainly those red flags have been when that hasn't been the case. So, it is that like if you're bringing somebody in where someone used spreadsheets and someone else is on all the latest cloud technology and has tons of automation,
Yep.
synergies even between the firms, getting users who have been, it's just kind of say the Stone Ages, and getting those users to like very quickly adopt to this new way of doing
Yep.
things with modern technology, it's going to be really difficult for the internal teams
Mm-hmm.
and the advisors, right? But then also your end clients, are really going to feel that strain as well because they're getting things very differently than their interaction, their experience working with advisors and the client service reps are going to be
Yes.
very different. So I think that is just a kind of a pain point I've seen, a red flag I've seen pop up. To that point, I also heard at a recent conference,
Yeah.
someone had actually mentioned um, getting getting someone's employee handbook and simply reviewing the
Smart.
handbook. Yeah.
Yes,
Uh,
how up to date is it? The new year came, are you distributing new handbooks? Have all the, oh my gosh, that's so smart.
I thought so too. I was like, gosh, that's a great idea. And to me, that also helps you, do a comparison to even see how close you are synergy wise,
Benefits,
yeah, yeah,
the whole thing.
yeah.
I've not heard that one. That's a great idea.
Mhm.
So, okay, let's say, and I feel like we could actually have a whole podcast just on the right, M&A, and I could go deeper into subtopics, but let's say that you go, okay, we're ready to go. We're ready to start this transition and we decided to move forward with whatever that with what this looks like. So in that transition period, where do you all come in and kind of what should folks brace themselves for lack of better words, sort of what kind of you've been able to kind of shine the light, or you've been able to help people kind of shine the light down these dark tunnels. What should they expect?
Yeah. So yeah, I guess on pre, there certainly is like getting in and reviewing your processes and your
Right.
workflow, and the data. I'd say post, it's looking at bringing all of that together, right? So it's now lots of data analysis. It's the conversion effort, and really a lot of it has to be on the validation of that conversion.
Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of people don't think about how much time it may take
Yep.
to to ensure that this consolidation is accurate.
Mm.
And I can't say it enough. You cannot just blindly trust that, you hand your data over to a vendor and they just load it and it's good. Like
It's gonna be great. That never happens
yeah,
that
it
way,
doesn't
right?
happen
Never.
that way. So, so
Yeah.
like make sure that you've actually planned enough time for your due diligence to ensure that that consolidation and that merging of data is actually accurate and you're good with it.
Hmm.
Um, because I've just seen too many problems with that.
Yeah, that's so fair.
um,
And then once it's in the system, sometimes it just sort of like collects dust, right? Or it's just not actually properly labeled or has the cadences associated with it. So it's such good advice. Yeah.
there's and in fact that actually brings up another thought I wanted to share. I think it's really important for both buyers and sellers to really be clear up front, even before this deal is inked,
Hmm.
that they know what data is going to actually get consumed and
Hmm.
consolidated. Because a lot of the buyers, they really only want to take performance intervals.
Yeah.
So if you're thinking that you're going to have all of your transaction history going back for 10, 20, or longer years, most most acquisitions are not bringing over transaction history. So you're
Hmm.
looking for gain loss data. You're looking for just that activity over time,
Right.
um, not going to get loaded into the new system. So make sure that you're prepared for that. That your advisors are prepared for that. And 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 of course even the clients, right? Because again, how are you going to work with not having that data at hand where you may have been
Right.
used to having that, as a resource
Right.
for
Right.
decision making and but even reporting to the clients.
Hmm.
And all too often we get involved in projects and it's, oh my gosh, we're halfway through the project and
Yeah.
all of a sudden the advisor that got acquired realizes, what? You mean I can't go and look at, the activity history from 3 years ago? I'm not going to have access to that. Well, what am I going to do? And it's kind of a little too much too late.
Yep,
Uh,
that's fair. That's fair. When you're sort of used to those patterns and those ways of operating. So I think it brings up to your earlier point of like kind of like really like looking under the hood and pulling things apart before you're actually into that place where you actually have to be able to do that so that both that buyer and seller can make this the transition as smooth as possible, both for the current clients, right, as well as the team, right, to
mhm.
hold that culture. So
Yeah. Yeah.
um any other thoughts about like kind of big lessons learned as you go into that post M&A transition, if you will?
Yeah, I would probably want to talk a little bit or just enforce the insight about the teams that are working on this.
Mm,
When people do an acquisition or even looking to sell, you think that, oh, okay, well the deal is done and we're good to go.
yeah.
Um, that's that was all the easy stuff from my experience and my perspective. Once that deal's signed and you are in that post acquisition stage, that's when the heavy lifting really starts.
Yep.
And you need to ensure that you have a team of people
Mhm.
that are dedicated to this successful consolidation, this
Mhm.
merge.
Mhm.
Most firms don't have resources available to the level of dedication that's needed.
Yeah.
This both firms on both sides, everybody has their full-time job,
Right.
which requires, 8 hours a day or whatever their involvement is. It's like
Yeah.
and and to now think, oh gosh, now there's this whole other project, a whole nother level of work that needs to happen to bring these firms together.
Mm.
It's a lot of heavy lifting.
That's so
And
smart to
kind of,
think about that. Yeah, go ahead.
yeah,
Sorry.
no, it's okay. I mean, like the point is, if you have not, really thought that through,
Yep.
Number one, your projects are going to go on way longer than they should.
Yep.
And two, you're going to get, your your employees are going to get really upset
Yeah.
and
Probably burn
burned out.
out.
They're going
Yeah,
to burn out. Yeah.
that's fair.
So and again, too, client experience. The client experience may be really bad as well.
Hmm.
We have had conversations with some other firms that have been doing like their consolidation, this transition effort for 2 or more years, and
Wow.
and that is just mind-boggling to me. That
Yeah.
you basically still have two separate operations teams, you have two separate platforms.
Not
You
efficient.
It's so inefficient. And of course, just think from a business perspective,
Yep.
but just management perspective to operations, again,
Culturally, the whole thing.
culturally, client experience. I mean,
Hmm.
all of it is so impacted.
Hmm.
And I don't think a lot of people think about that. I mean, it's interesting. I was even thinking beforehand, like
Yeah.
the level of service that clients are getting, that can even make it difficult for marketing and even
Hmm.
brand recognition.
Hmm.
Um, and I of course, I'm sure, as most other people, tend to follow Michael Kitz's,
Yes,
and
yes, yes.
and he, of course, does a lot of talking about marketing and has lots of words of advice on marketing strategy. And I can guarantee you that operating as two separate entities for years
Yep.
post merge is definitely not the right thing to do.
Yep.
Uh, it's
Yes. He also talks a lot about target market, right? And really being able to lean into that. So going back to kind of the culture fit and the strengths of the team and training all of that. I mean, I just would assume those would be naturally kind of questions that would come out as you're sorting out the fit too. So,
exactly.
um,
Yeah, the I know you asked kind of about timeline as well, and timeline to me, a typical merge, post acquisition should
mm-hmm,
take no more than 6 months. If
mm,
you are not fully consolidated in 6 months,
hmm.
then you need to really look at
Red
your
flag.
process. That's a red flag.
Hmm.
And at that point, you really, if you haven't already pulled in somebody to get some additional support or
Right.
assistance, you really need to. I'd also say if you are getting support from somebody and it still is taking that long, or dragging out, maybe it's time for a reassessment as well.
Hmm. Hmm. Nope, that's such good advice. One of the things I wanted to call out too, I had listened to a podcast, I don't know, must have been several months ago, and they were talking about going through an M&A. It was a business owner who was being interviewed, and she talked about one of the things that she did not expect from of this, and I don't know if you face this at all, is the how mentally challenging it was and emotionally challenging it was from sort of starting this business to making that transition, which of course that can impact culture. You're trying to take care of your team, like all of that. I'm sure you see
Mm,
some of that going on too, right? I mean, not just from the team, but especially from the owners or partners or founder, whomever it might be. So I feel like that's something that doesn't get talked about a lot, but I feel like is something that impacts a lot of people as they're exploring these opportunities. So,
absolutely. I mean, I think especially from like the seller side of things,
mhm,
you're going, I tend to see more that emotional concern, I
mhm.
guess, from people. Really, because a lot of those folks are, of course, going to be worried about job stability, longevity,
Oh yeah. Yeah.
and and I think a lot of people just assume, oh, well, we just got acquired. I guess they're going to be slashing jobs, and I'm going to be out the door soon. So I think it certainly is something that owners should not overlook. They really do need to make sure that they're talking with their team
Yep.
about what the future holds, what it looks like. I
Yeah.
mean, if anything, I think a lot of people don't think about the fact that merging in with another organization means, of course, a larger company, which likely means there's new rules and
Hmm.
there's opportunity for advancement that
Yep.
probably didn't exist at their previous job. So I think there's actually more opportunities, to look forward to
Yep.
than the fear of losing your job.
Yep.
But
So such a good point too.
Mhm.
So
Um,
yeah, go.
I just thought of something else too to share, in like the pre
Hmm.
M&A deal, I think there's a lot of owners too that are worried about even telling employees that
Hmm.
they're going to be, doing a deal.
Yeah, yeah.
But I do think it's actually beneficial to be open and sharing that with your team,
Mhm.
because I think that there's a lot that your team can contribute to
Mhm.
actually make the deal, kind of the best that it can be,
Yep.
and certainly helps with the transition as well if they are aware of what's going on.
Yep. Just open, honesty, and kind of helping coach people through that. I think if they're along for the journey, that makes a really big difference. So,
Yeah,
um, oh my goodness. Well, I feel like we could chat for a while. But
yeah.
anything else that you want to make sure that, to sort of round us out here that you'd like to share, or any additional resources we can point folks to?
Yeah, I'd say our website is the best resource. So it's verisoftconsulting.com. Appreciate if anybody's interested to feel free and check us out. There's a contact form you can fill out and reach out to us. You can also look up our company or even me specifically on LinkedIn. We'd love to connect with folks. But yeah, we're here as a resource to help both buyers and sellers pre and post M&A, in any capacity. So however we can be of assistance, always look forward to that.
Oh my goodness. Well, Verity, thank you so much. We'll make sure to include those links here in the show notes. Really appreciate your time and your insights and working with firms, especially as they're going through these big transitions, and making sure that their teams and just the whole, the whole process is well rounded and set up for success. So thank you for sharing some insights.
Thank you for having me again. Thank you. It was great.
Absolutely.